Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here and for your patience. I want to go back to some, number one, I want to start with Border Patrol. I think they're doing a fantastic job. I'm kind of curious recently, how's their morale in the face of all the things they're dealing with right now?
Their morale is impacted. They're tired. A lot of them have gotten sick. They've been exposed to flu, chickenpox, measles, mumps, all kinds of challenges in terms of the medical care. They're spending time waiting overnight in hospitals instead of patrolling the border. This is not the kind of work that they want to be doing, not what they're trained for, and it's an impact. There's no question. I think they're counting on us to have a conversation that helps solve this problem, and we need to do it.
How's recruiting going? How many open positions do we have now?
Our recruiting is actually proceeding pretty successfully this year. We ended last year with more agents than we started for the first time in 4 years. We've continued to make progress with our Border Patrol agents. Our CBP officer hiring is being dramatically successful. We've hired 5,000 officers in the last 5 years. We're gonna be over 1,200 net gain this fiscal year in CBP officers. So thanks to the Congress's support, we're adding key professionals that we need for security and for facilitating trade and travel.
The Border Patrol chief estimated that about 40% of the people are doing jobs that they didn't sign up for. You mentioned in certain sectors that's as many as 50%. When they're not doing Border Patrol tasks, what additional risks do we have in terms of illegal crossings?
It's heightened. There's no question. We know there are crossings that we're missing. We know that smugglers are using diversionary tactics. And with the additional... Is
it a diversionary tactic, taking people that want to find a Border Patrol agent and present themselves, so you got all the resources on a group of people presenting themselves at the expense of drugs and human traffickers, using that diversion to cross the border illegally and just drift into the landscape?
Right. So we'll have a group of agents deployed in a certain area of the border. The smugglers will then, say in Rio Grande Valley or in Del Rio, send 3 or 4 or 5 rafts full of families across at the same time as they're making landing, and we got to make sure that's a safe process. Those agents are responding to apprehend, to support, to make sure that there's no immediate health needs. Meanwhile, people come around behind them.
And they're criminals, smugglers.
Absolutely. The same smuggling organization that's capitalizing on the migrants are the ones smuggling the drugs.
And you said, I want to get some of these numbers right. Number one, I want to make sure I got the right context, but you were saying that 9 out of 10, in response to one question, have a criminal record. Is that of the total, or give me an idea of what that means?
9 out of 10 with a criminal record is those interior apprehensions by ICE enforcement removal operations. So the 25% of their total in custody population that comes from interior operations, 9 out of 10 of those have a criminal record.
And you were saying that 30% of the people crossing the border illegally are evading capture. Why would they?
Seeking to evade capture.
Seeking to evade capture.
Yes.
Why would they seek to evade capture?
Because they're
give me some examples.
1, they have a criminal record. 2, they're smuggling drugs. 3, they're a gang member. Or 4, they're just a single adult who realizes that that's the one population that we can actually hold in detention pending an immigration proceeding and effectively repatriate.
Border deaths, something else we don't talk about, but I think in fiscal year 18, we had 281 people who recovered dead people on American soil. I think in this year, we're up to about 68 so far. Over the past 20 years, I think it was estimated somewhere around 10,000 people have died trying to cross the border on American soil. Do we have any data on the number of people who are dying on the journey before they even get here?
We don't have good data from Mexico. I think the Associated Press did an analysis that pegged it at least 1,000 a year dying in the journey in Mexico, and they acknowledged that they had serious information gaps that probably indicated they were undercounting. It's been a really deadly last 6 weeks at the border. We had a 10-month-old drown in Del Rio sector. We had 2 adults basically collapsed almost immediately upon crossing and apprehension, and were taken to the hospital and died in the last 3 weeks. This is the kind of situation that we're seeing, given the flow, given the illnesses, and given the rigors and dangers of the journey.
The public health crisis is something that we haven't talked about. You mentioned it in terms of the exposure that our Border Patrol agents are having, but what are we seeing in terms of the population, over 130,000 in the last month? What are we seeing about the general health of this population when they come into the country?
Well, we're currently managing over 250 cases of H1N1 flu in one sector in Rio Grande Valley where we have an outbreak, and trying to do that safely and effectively. We've now have 2 pediatricians that we've deployed to the main station where these individuals are quarantined. That's just a snapshot. ICE has over 4,000 people in custody that are in quarantine for months. Meaning that the bed space in those locations have to be underutilized because they can't bring anyone in or out until that quarantine period expires. These are the daily challenges that we're facing, given this flow and given the fact that people are coming with more illnesses, and we have more children and younger children coming that have acute medical needs all too often.
Well, thank you for being here. And again, I thank all the people in Border Patrol for the work they're doing. We've got to provide them relief. We've got to stop talking past everybody and recognize there's a humanitarian crisis. There's a public health crisis. Congress's inaction is really aiding and abetting, I think, the increase in illicit drugs and illicit activities crossing our border, and we really do have to act. Thank you very much for being here and for your service.